Good morning. Today we are going to talk a little bit about deadheading the perennial garden. The perennial garden, if designed right, is going to offer bloom color throughout the entire season. While one plant is in full bloom, another is getting ready to bloom, while yet another is finishing bloom. In order to keep the landscape garden looking neat and tidy, and also to get the perennials to blossom longer, deadheading is required. Here we're looking at a May night salvia, which is well past its full bloom, and it is time to deadhead. Every plant is a little bit different in how you deadhead and when, so you have to get to know your plant material that you're working with. For May night salvia, after the flower has faded, here's a faded flower. Here's a flower that's gone to seed and already dropped probably. And then here's a flower that's still in full bloom. But you can go back and you can see the branch of the flower. Really, it's a stem that starts way back here, and all of that can be trimmed off. So I'm going to go ahead and deadhead this plant, and I'll show you what it looks like in a few minutes. So here we are. Here's that May night salvia with a nice mid-season haircut. And what's left is a rejuvenated looking plant within the planting garden. There were still a couple of nice blossoms, so I left those. But here's a picture of the debris pile. So I probably removed about 2/3 or 3/4 of the total plant growth. Within the planting bed, what deadheading also does, besides refresh that individual plant, now it reveals a couple of other smaller plants around it that are blossoming that were otherwise hidden. Now let's look at a type of sedum. Sometimes plants flower and send up flower shoots, and they're so numerous that it's just really not quite practical to deadhead. This is a small patch of sedum, so it's not a real big deal. But if this was a ground cover over 20 or more square feet, it would be a little bit cumbersome, and maybe I'd be tempted to enjoy the texture that the seed heads offer and just leave it. This is right at the edge of my planting bed, so I think it looks a little bit untidy, and I'm going to go ahead and fix that. So here we are again. It's all tidied up. And now what that does is it reveals this really beautiful texture of the plant itself. The flowers were nice when it was in full bloom, but then it got a little bit lanky looking, and now we can enjoy the blue texture of the sedum leaves of the plant itself. Alright, so here's one more. This is a coral bell. Coral bells have tall, wiry stems with a cluster of bell-shaped flowers, and they bloom for a very long time. This has been going since May, and it's mid-July, and what happens is they finally just sort of peter out. There's not a whole lot left on this, and some of them are in fact completely done. So I'll go ahead and take off the entire wire stem and clean up this portion of the garden. Alright, and this is what it looks like. So a couple of things to point out when we are making deadheading cuts is that you want to make them below the foliage, so down into the plant, so that you're not left with blunt stalks exposed. So if I was going to be really, really picky, this stalk right here would maybe be a little bit high, because I could see that, and what happens is it starts to dry out after it's been cut off, and then you're left with a tan stick up above the plant. So you want to make sure that those are below the leaves that are left. And that's how you deadhead a garden.